here because they're going to have an opportunity to vote on it around noontime. And so, being able to contact them first thing, talk to their staff, maybe get their ear and share our talking points is the best that we can do. We have both Corinne and Angela, our two government affairs people that are going to be at the meeting today. Corinne is going to provide comments, and and we've been in touch with Dr. Mazzullo, the bill sponsor, for weeks, trying to strike some common ground for agreeable language, and we just have not been able to do it. And then I heard over the weekend from people close to him that there will be no more changes to the bill. So we've got no choice but to take the steps that we're taking now.
Okay, so who do we need to contact beside our legislators that we can find, with our zip code?
Well, you have the committee list, right?
Where was that list?
It was on the bottom half of Ellen's, of Natalia's email, I think, to you guys, but let me.
Oh, perfect.
I also sent it out this morning.
Thank you. So it's in a table. It has the name, and it has the email, and it has the telephone number.
Okay, and it wasn't in the email from last night, because I'll forward that on to the school too.
Okay, thank you.
Or did you already do that, Ellen?
No, I sent it to the whole database. I don't know what the school will do with it.
Okay, well, I've been in contact with the dean and in the last couple of weeks, and I'll just forward it to her this morning.
Yes.
So
So it's on the legislation. I put in the chat is a link to that page that has all the information.
Perfect.
It's also in the email I sent out at around 7 o'clock this morning.
I will find the email and forward it to her right now. And it came from you, Ellen?
Pardon me?
The email came from you?
From director, probably from David at fsoma.org.
NCD 2020.
And that was this morning or last night?
This morning.
Oh, because I have a set up Zoom recording from David. Is that the one?
You know what, here, let me just send this to you, Teresa.
I have a set up Zoom recording for 6 p.m. today. That's the email I got this morning. I'm looking to see if there's any more from David. Don't see any more. I see 3 from FSOMA. One was at 9:24 last night, 10:29 for the breakfast link.
Teresa, I just sent you the
Okay.
that table.
Okay, and I'll just send that right over to the school.
Yeah.
Mario, are you guys in school this morning?
Yeah, there are some classes ongoing this morning. Yes.
Okay, all right. Tell them they need to jump on it. This is not time for a class right now.
Right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, some of them have quizzes or exams, but I will definitely call administration. And we have a WhatsApp app with all of the students, so I will put that information on here.
Good morning, Dr. Castillo. Thank you for being here too.
That's my pleasure.
Hello.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, good morning. I just noticed on the template there's a typo. So
Yeah, I know, $. I thank you. If everybody would just correct that.
I'm trying to correct it now. So
I was going to say Fernando caught that with my typing last night, and he corrected it this morning.
Okay,
But, thank you.
I'm copying and pasting emails into the committee and sending individual emails out
Yeah,
to the committee right now while we're on the meeting.
yeah, that's the best use of our time, and I appreciate it. And we can just use the subject line, no vote on. Let's say asking for your no vote on HB 583. How's everybody doing? Okay with our little tasks this morning?
Yeah. Do you guys, David, I know the school had, in a previous email, had the links to the representatives, you know, how you can
Yeah,
click. But is there, you know, a quick email so they don't have to go looking again?
I think it's, you know, all they have to do is we could search, if you put in my Florida.
Okay. I was just trying to make it, oh, you know what? I'll look for the email that I had sent them a week or two or 3 weeks ago and see. And because, you know, if it's not convenient, people are going to get frustrated and not do it, you know?
Oh yeah, I know they're a bunch of babies.
Most people are.
I feel, you know, I understand. It's one of those things, like if it's not, you're not doing it all the time and you only have a few minutes to try to do something like this, it's much easier if everything is right in front of you. And we can do that. I can put it in the chat, or I think if you think it's sending it in a separate email is the best and easiest way to do it, we can do that too. Here's the, if I put that link in the chat, do you think that's helpful?
Yes.
Okay, let me do that.
I'll grab it and send it with it, just to make it like super convenient for
Yeah,
everybody.
I understand. And it's a great idea. So here's that link. And I think I'm sending that to.
Yeah, we're not asking our personal rep to vote no on this unless they happen to be on the
I
committee.
would say, you know, if we got all the way through, you know, the list of people that we need to contact, and which
That
is on
should
the
be
committee,
good
no
enough.
vote,
That'll be good enough for today.
that's good enough for today, because they're going to
Okay,
see this
okay.
at 10:30.
Okay,
And
all right.
ideally, we have the rest of the week to reach
To
out
do
to those
together.
individual, you know, representatives that are in our own constituents and
Okay,
make them aware. This is more of an education thing, and saying,
okay, then I'll save that for you know, tomorrow.
and you see that, I'm sorry, where I posted, I think it went to everybody, the myfloridahouse.gov/representative in the chat.
I see YouTube. Oh wait, no, I'm in the wrong. I'm sorry. Yeah, my house. Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Got it.
Okay, just open that up and then I can copy in that link. Okay, so I will get to all that now.
I'm gonna mute myself for a second. I'm gonna call Orlando and see if the school is aware of this project this morning. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here, if anybody has questions.
Hey, Ellen, it's Sarah Allen.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Good. I was wondering if we could blind copy the representatives instead of just sending separate emails, or is that not okay?
Oh, you can if that's the way you need to do it. It's really better to send individual, but just getting the message there, it's
Okay.
important. It's
All right, thank
taking me
you.
probably half an hour to copy and paste individuals,
Yeah. Okay.
but you
Thank
can.
you.
Hello, Ellen. I'm going to leave the meeting right now so I can continue with my sending the copies, and I've called my family members to do the same. So we're kind of busy doing that. Okay.
Great, Rhoda. Thank you.
Thank you for keeping me in the loop. I'm doing that right now, so I'm going to leave the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'm gonna text Lynn McPherson, David, and see if he can contact his East West College folks.
Thanks, Ellen. I heard you. How's everybody doing? Okay.
Trying.
Give me a thumbs up. I know.
I want my Starbucks coffee, David.
Well, you could, anybody that needs a coffee break, I've got the key to untether you from your chair. It's okay. Thank you.
Coffee's in the mail, right?
I see we've got about 30 people on the line, and this is fabulous. Anybody have any questions, you can unmute and ask.
We had one in the chat, David, about who else is affected. I know something about the opticians or optometrists, but
Right,
you can answer.
optometrists were able to get their amendment on Friday. And so they're included in this bill. And right now it's really acupuncturists and other, other disciplines that have a like 2-tier entry, and or like we do a master's and a doctorate program, or people who don't have their professional titles, they're listed in their statute. So specifically, acupuncturists are probably at the greatest risk right now with this, because it requires a statutory change, and that's uphill. It's much easier with a stroke of a pen for them to have created an amendment for us. So there's some rationale or reasoning or understanding in terms of why they won't do that. It hasn't been shared completely with me, but I don't have any other way of interpreting it.
Do you want to share any about what you heard from the senator and the influence of the Senate president?
Yeah, I could say, anybody on the line, the dynamic between the Senate and the House is what they call the upper and lower chamber. And Senator Harrell is the sponsor for this bill in the House, that Senate Bill 230. And she started
in the Senate. She's in the Senate.
Yeah, Senate, her Bill 230 flew through 3 committees in 3 weeks in the early part of February. And she's she's been the chair of the Senate Health Care Committee for a couple of years. We've had a number of interactions with her office going back to physical therapy issues and other issues that affected acupuncturists. And so I know, for example, people that are in her district down in Stewart and in that Palm Beach area that were Palm Beach County area that were contacting her, and there was pushback from her staff when we used some of our talking points, like nobody had been disciplined for, you know, inappropriately using titling like doctor. There was a lot of pushback from that office saying, you know, they have specific examples of abuses in this way. They feel very strongly that our profession is, you know, has been coloring outside the lines, and they just had no patience for any discussion. And Corinne had the same experience with them. And, you know, she was trying to work with Senator Harrell and her staff early on in this process to include acupuncturists. Well, fast forward, you know, now that there's a companion bill with Dr. Mazzullo, his language has been amended to include podiatrists, to include, you know, I think audiologists, to include optometrists are the latest. And when I spoke to the people that were closest to him, you know, Corinne had a text exchange with him on Thursday night and just said, you know, the bill's closed. I'm not making any other changes. And so before I changed, you know, had the discussion about changing our strategy to kill the bill with a no vote request, I had a phone call Saturday afternoon after hours with his closest legislative advisor. This is Dr. Mazzullo's advisor. He's from my district, and I've met him, and his office is about 5 miles down the road from me. He's a dermatologist with a big practice here in Citrus County. But I reached out through one of the big boosters in our community to say, you know, I need somebody that's right next to Mazzullo so I can get some information on this. You know, and I had an exchange with him on Saturday, and he just explained that if Mazzullo was to make any more changes to the bill, they'd probably lose the support of Harrell's in the Senate, and then they may strike all of his language and try to move ahead without it. And so there's this sort of move to preserve what he could, and he's not going to vote his own bill into oblivion. You know, he's going to do the best he can to get it approved the way it is. And so this is where, you know, politics cross with the reality of it. And so now, you know, Corinne has told us that the bill is not really all that popular in the House because it has a real restrictive nature to it. You know, it causes more challenges for small businesses in general outside of acupuncturists, and it has a dampening effect on encouraging other people into, you know, healthcare practices outside of medicine. And all of those things are unpopular in the House. So all we can do is move forward with a no.
How many more committees are there in the House?
Right, 2 more. The next committee is the Healthcare Appropriations Subcommittee. They haven't been scheduled yet to hear the bill because it's being voted on for the first time now in the House. And then the last is the large Healthcare Appropriations or Healthcare Committee. And Dr. Mazzullo is on that committee. So, you know, I think if he gets a thumbs up today and he gets a thumbs up in the Appropriation Subcommittee, you know, we're gonna have even a harder time getting this shot down in his own committee. Okay, but it means that this is our only course of action. If we're gonna be, you know, advocate on our own behalf, this is what we have to do. And again, the remedy for us, if the bill passes as is that we need to open our statute and do what's required under that new law, which is include our professional titles in definitions for 457. I hope that's clear for everybody.
Is there any way to influence Senator Harrell or find out what this information she has?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is something that we're going to have to work on. I don't know that she's not taking any meetings until May. In other words, she's done talking to anybody outside of her internal orbit on this until after this is either adopted or shot down. And, you know, from her perspective, I think that she really, you know, she's in a position to feel strongly that it's going to pass the way that it's set up. So, you know, there may be an opportunity to improve that relationship and either one, better understand where she's getting her information from, or offer a counter narrative something that she's willing to accept. But that won't happen in my mind until, the summer, probably June or July. And I say that because I know Corinne has been trying to get back to Senator Harrell's office. And part of my conversation on Saturday with lobbyist was that, he had asked Dr. Mazzullo, do you want me to go over to the House to the Senate and try to, come to some arrangement with Senator Harrell. And at this point, the response from Dr. Mazzullo was, leave it alone. So he wasn't going to try to push her any harder for his point of view.
Guys, I hope I'll be back in a little while.
Hey, Dickie, thanks so much.
The roofing truck just showed up.
All right. They'll be banging and clanging. Thanks, Dickie.
Oh, that's such a noisy week.
I know, it's awful.
It's even awful when it's your neighbors.
Right, the whole earth shakes.
A lot of the houses in my neighborhood are Andrew roofs, so they're all getting redone in the last handful of years.
So David, what's the next committee after today?
It's the Healthcare Appropriations Subcommittee.
So if need be, we're hoping not, we'll start putting out that contact information.
Right, we'll have that, today, this afternoon, tonight. And it'll be a new list. There's a few names that are on all of this lists. For example, Representative Saltzman, SALZMAN, is on all three committees, and she's in the leadership, I think, on healthcare appropriations. So there's some that I would say are more critical than others, although they're all important. But certainly, Saltzman, Bartleman, these representatives sit on multiple healthcare committees, so they're going to hear the same bill 2 or 3 times in a 2 or 3 week period. And the better job we do of touching base with them, I think, is more important than somebody who might just hear this once and be on to other committee work. Okay, so then after we send all these emails to this committee, then we need to make phone calls the rest of the morning. I think we should, I think that's what we need to be doing is just, start in the middle or the bottom of the list and keep it short. We just need to make our point. And, if we give in a staffer, then the material that's in blue fits for a pretty good 30-second script. Okay.
She's out of Escambia, which is West Panhandle.
Nice. This is Saltzman.
Unless I'm wrong about where the county is, let me just double check. Yeah, she's almost all the way Pensacola. If you know anybody in Pensacola, get them to call her.
Don't.
Bellevue.
Hey guys, I know I'm late to this party and I apologize.
No. We're here.
Yeah.
We're rolling till late. Thank you.
So I'm new to Florida. I moved down here from New York, and New York, we're not allowed to do anything. We're not allowed to use anything, even title wise, right? So if this bill passes,
Yep.
how will that affect us? And like, what's going to happen in the long run?
I'm
Did I
glad
hear
you're
you say
asking.
We'll have to change the scope of practice, or
No. Well, this is what the legislature is doing with this bill specifically, is that they are forevermore separating the educational and academic titles from the professional titles that can be used for healthcare providers under 456. 456 in Florida is the general occupations statute that covers, doctors, osteopaths, nurses, podiatrists, chiropractors, massage therapists, acupuncturists. There's about a dozen or so professions that are all generally regulated under 456. And then we have our own individual statutes like we do with 457. And so what they're saying is, we don't care what your academic degree is. You're only allowed to use the professional title that's defined and included in your individual practice act. And so in our case, the only professional title that's defined in our practice act is acupuncturist. So what that
Okay.
means going after July 1st is it doesn't matter if you have a PhD in acupuncture, a doctoral degree, multiple degrees, is the only professional title that you're able to use is acupuncturist in any advertising, communication, descriptor of you, your business, your practice.
Couldn't we could use licensed acupuncturist.
That's not defined in statute, but I think, you know, they'd probably be reluctant in some way to actually go to the trouble of a disciplinary case for somebody who used licensed acupuncturist, even though that's not defined.
Yeah, chiropractors can only use certified acupuncture. So,
Right, and as it applies to, but they you know, they're chiropractic physicians, doctor of chiropractic medicine. All of these other terms are defined, and even if they're not, they're now included in with an amendment under this new language. And so the opportunity with the new legislation was it stated the case that anybody that uses the term doctor or physician, either alone or as part of their professional title, who's not included in this bill and who does not have it defined in their practice act, could be disciplined for the unlicensed practice of medicine. So they've expanded the definition of the practice of medicine to not only include the acts involved with the practice of medicine, but also the professional titles.
Okay, so then we need to change our practice act if and when that passes.
Correct. That's so the remedy is we have to open 457 and make some inclusions for titling that's consistent with our education.
and even if we block the bill this year, that's probably advisable.
Correct. You know, we have other business to take care of with 457 as well, which was, you know, already discussed and scheduled by the association, but this would just expand those tasks. And, you know, we've had our existing language for more than 20 years. And it's in my argument with legislators has been, you know, it's unchanged basically because it protects the public as intended. There's been no demand for, you know, making changes to that language. It satisfied the requirements for, you know, practice of acupuncture. You know, they've just up and moved the goalposts, you know, 25 yards and now we're outside of the frame.
Okay. Okay, thank you for explaining that. And my fingers are crossed that it doesn't pass. I'm
Right.
definitely doing my part. I have two legislators that are in my complex, but nobody's ever there because it's a satellite office.
Right.
So, but I look every day, calls, emails, every single solitary day. So
That's beautiful.
then, well, I suppose if and when, let's hope not, but if it does, then we'll all get together and we'll take cohesive action on getting our titles a little bit more. I forget the word you used, the practice act, and make sure
Yeah.
that okay, good.
That's what
Thank
we
you
gotta
so
do.
much for answering my questions, David. I
No, of
really-
course, I appreciate you being here and thanks for the question. It's an excellent opportunity for me to sort of maybe clarify for everybody the same question.
There's some questions in the chat, David.
Is this something that you can read to me or?
I can't, I'm sorry.
Okay. Let me.
Sorry, I put, this is Sarah Allen.
Thanks, Sarah.
I put a question in because my understanding from reading the bills, and maybe it was the one in the Senate, I don't remember, but it was that we could use the doctor title if we clearly stated doctor of acupuncture or oriental medicine
I know.
with the word doctor. Because
Well,
there was the languaging in there that we could put a D of acupuncture or whatever, but not say like Dr. Allen.
The other thing that you have to sort of read with that same language is that it says that you can that it's based on language that's authorized in the Practice Act. And in our case, we have no language that authorizes use of those terms in our Practice Act.
We
And
have
so-
the acronyms.
Right, so you know, and again, I think the initials that are provided for AP and DOM, that's not clearly, it's not really defined, and it's under prohibited acts and not under you know, and it's in other words, that prohibited acts language applies to non-acupuncturists in our own statute. It says, you know, if you're not licensed under 457, you cannot use these titles. So it's hard for us to establish authority to use the titles when it's not in definitions personally. And I've had that conversation with the attorneys, and they go back and forth with me on that. They can see where it's not expressly authorized. And so what we're really looking for is something that's really clear. So I hope that explains, you know, why that section where it says that applies to non-physicians, that's late, you know, further down in the bill. It's basically saying you can use these doctor titles based on those titles being authorized in the statute. And since we have no authority in the statute to use those, that doesn't provide permission for us to do it.
Hi, this is Joelle Saldana. I have a question.
Please.
I had a couple, but some of them were already asked. So my question is, so if this bill does pass, how does it affect how we practice outside of the title?
Yeah, it has no impact on practice. This is about advertising and use of titles. And so if your business card includes initials AP, DOM, or any, you know, acupuncture physician, doctor of oil and medicine, doctor of acupuncture and oil and medicine, anything related to your professional title, that has to change. If it's on your website, that has to change. If it's on your stenciling for your office, that has to change. If it's used to advertise in any way, or promote your business, like in a directory for insurance credentialing or participation in an insurance network, all of those things need to be updated, including contracts and stuff like this.
So the attorney,
I have a,
the attorneys don't believe we can use AP and DOM.
To me,
I
this applies to both titles and abbreviations, and I think it's you know, if you want to use that, and if you're in a situation where you're being disciplined, you want to say, hey, there's authority for it in chapter 457. The burden's going to be on you to prove that the prohibited acts section of 457, which applies to non-licensees, applies to, if you read that carefully, it doesn't apply to acupuncturists. It's saying you cannot use this title if you're not licensed under 457. That doesn't provide express authority to use them if you are authorized under 457. So I you know, that maybe, you know, you could probably sway somebody on any given day one way or the other, but it's certainly not the way that authority is conveyed in the statute. Authority is conveyed not with a double negative that applies to non-licensed acupuncturists. It's going to be conveyed in some affirmative statement that says this is the title, this is the abbreviation that's available to licensees. I hope that helps clear that up, right?
I have one sort of follow-up question to that. Is what about the doctoral degrees, like the DACMs?
Yeah.
Does this apply to that?
Yes.
It does.
Okay.
So it would prohibit the use of doctor even if it's a doctoral degree?
Correct. That's what they're doing with this bill, is they're separating the academic and educational degree from the professional title. They're saying, you know, we don't care what education training you have, you cannot advertise, you cannot use your academic title as an advertising mechanism for your professional practice if you're a healthcare practitioner. You know, if you're licensed under, or if you're regulated under 456. So in other words, this wouldn't apply to the bug doctor, the rug doctor, you know, Dr. Love, you know, whatever, any other non-health related profession that somebody may advertise to use the word doctor. That doesn't apply to this. This applies specifically to healthcare licensees. And so since they're saying that your professional title that you can use and advertise with has to be defined and authorized in your Practice Act. It doesn't matter what your educational background is.
That's very unfortunate.
I agreed.
No way to get a bill going this year, huh?
I
No,
have a
you know,
question.
please.
So let's pretend, you know, this all passes as it is.
Yep.
If we have materials out there that were printed before this, you know, business cards, brochures, information out there, like at other offices, like I've got some materials at some chiropractors' offices and things like that, that they distribute for me. If we can't hunt all of that down and, replace that with, the new titles and things like that, is there a chance that we could get in trouble or, will we
Yes.
will it be understood that this was, printed when it was legal?
Yeah, no, you have to comply with the law based on its effective to date. And this is going to be effective July 1st, if it passes.
So we need to be diligent in hunting down anything that
Yeah,
has
you're
our-
going to be responsible
out there.
for anything that's out there. And, again, you can, the penalty and and how you're disciplined remains to be seen. It's, I'm sure we'll have some examples of somebody who just didn't get the message, was, operating out, in a way that they're not familiar with this process, and they may be subject of a disciplinary case, and we'll see what the, is this, are they given 30 days to comply? Are they given $500 fine? We don't know what the disciplinary component of this is going to look like yet. But in terms of your question, we are required to comply based on its effective date.
Thank you.
Hi, David. I've got a question for you. Caroline Pena here.
Oh, hey, Caroline, good morning.
Hey, good morning. I thought it was really interesting when I was talking to you the other day we were talking about funds, and the way that you put it was genius. And I would love for you to just put together like a little paragraph that I could put out on social media about how much money is really needed for us to lobby for our license. And, you said there's a particular number, which is very small amount of acupuncturists that are having to pay, we pay like almost $300 a year to support our profession through FASOMA. But you said that if every licensed acupuncturist in Florida paid just $35 a year, that we would have such an impact in Washington, and actually in our profession, to lift ourselves up to where we deserve to be educationally.
Yeah.
So I want to put something like that out. I want you to put those numbers on paper so I can post it.
Okay. I'm happy to do that. Watch for my email, Carol.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's, when you look at, the size of our profession, it's not, it's the optometrists who were just, blessed with being amended into this Practice Act. They have something like 2,300 licenses in Florida, which is about 400 less than we do with acupuncture, but their state association has 1,700 participants. So you can see where they have maybe 80% participation. It must swell their coffers when you have that many people participating. So we don't have we're not blessed with the same participation from the profession. But even if somebody said, look, I don't want to support the association, David doesn't know what he's talking about, or it's just ideologically not what they want to do. If they would put $35 or $50 a year into the PAC, that would represent somewhere between $100 and $130 or $40,000 that makes sense for providing legislative support, and for us to use creating training and education tools for our legislators, and for us to make sure that our lobbyists have all of the support they need. Corinne, more often than not, shows up with a good story and not a lot of not a lot of funding. And so she's only going to be as effective sometimes as she's able to sort of give. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. It's in any one person's hands, but the idea that you're legislatively active, you're able to visit a dozen people and contribute $5,000 to $7,000 to their campaign election fund, support them with buying signs or getting people involved in door knocking campaigns and things like this, just in their local district. This goes a long way to put a face on the profession, and because we don't have either a huge profession or an enormous PAC money, then we depend on more of a grassroots approach that does includes a little bit of palm hand slapping and handshaking.
I just want to know how this bill came about, like if Like, what was the reason for this? It just seems kind of strange that they're doing this. So.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's hard for me to say, but if I were going to look at the, you know, the healthcare landscape and say, you know, what would compel, you know, MDs in particular, or osteopaths to sort of circle the wagons on this, I think that it's not really that acupuncturists have a target on their back, although it feels that way now that we're at the 11th hour and they won't create space in the back, you know, for us to jump on board with an amendment, given you know, the history of our profession here in Florida. But to answer your question, I think that, you know, we're seeing more and more examples of certification programs that are being awarded to people with no healthcare license that says things like, you know, functional medicine doctor, holistic doctor, naturopathic doctor, you know, for certification programs out of, you know, private colleges or, you know, private programs that provide these certifications to healthcare, you know, health coaches and, you know, other people that are sort of tangentially involved in the health information business, but they're not necessarily licensed practitioners. And so I think that from an advertising and use of the word doctor, there's sort of this willingness or to circle the wagons around some of this terminology to sort of say, hey, look, if you don't have a practice act that provides, you know, authorization for you to use these terms, we think that it's an issue about, you know, protecting, you know, patients from fraudulent and deceptive advertising and activity. I think it, you know, I think it comes from somewhere like that. It's hard for me to put my finger on it exactly, but as a licensed healthcare practitioner myself, when I see those programs out of Clearwater and, you know, out of state and other programs, it does make me cringe a little bit, you know. So I can understand it really, you know, getting the ire of the you know, medical profession.
Can I share something?
Please.
So I just got off the phone with my rep who is on one of the subcommittees, and
Beautiful.
she told me what the substance of her conversation with Masulo was, because I wrote her earlier in the week. So this is my understanding of her understanding of what Masulo said.
Yeah.
She told me that Masulo said that this doesn't apply to practitioners of Oriental medicine because we have our own practice act that we're regulated under, that this is more, and she asked me, do you work in a hospital? And I say, no. She said, well, Masulo told her that this is not going to apply to Oriental medicine practitioners in their own office, that this was designed to regulate who can go into a hospital or other medical setting like that and call themselves physicians.
Well, then, you know, unfortunately, that's not the way the bill is written. You know, if you look at the language under non-physicians, there's language in there that discusses wearing name tags and, you know, properly, you know, having your credentials properly displayed and whatnot in facilities. And there's an exemption for people that are working in their own office, for example, that have a diploma hanging on the wall, which applies to 99% of licensed acupuncturists. But that paragraph where it discusses how non-physicians can use and advertise their professional titles is wrapped into what is authorized in your statute. And that's why we were saying just a few minutes ago that that, you know, the remedy is with the Practice Act, and actually that's the conversation I had with Masulo's closest legislative, you know, lobbyist and contact person. Was, you know, we ended our conversation by him saying, you know, sounds like you guys need to run a bill, and, you know, I'd be happy to help you with that next year. You know, and in other words, you know, you can send me 50K and I'll get involved in supporting that. So
We need to go back to that rep and say something that it does affect us and impact us.
I think, you know, this is how, and again, I think that there's probably a certain amount of, and as this is not unusual, sometimes when, you know, language is drafted, again, I don't think that they were trying to target acupuncturists. They were just trying to tighten up on these use of these professional titles. And, you know, the net has got us ensnared.
The other thing is that I was also in touch with the ranking Democrat on the healthcare regulation subcommittee that's going to vote this morning.
Dynamite.
And I had previously said that we wanted an amendment. And so now I sent her the thing that says vote no. And
Yep.
so she texted back, what if you were included? And I said, if we're included, great. But the legislative committee of the state association does not have confidence that the amendment is going to go through. And so if we can get an amendment and inclusion, that's the goal, but otherwise vote no. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
perfect. That's exactly
All
the case. And, it sounds, unfortunately, in these instances, it sounds a little self-serving, from the outside. It's like, you know what, they like it if it includes them, but they don't like it if it doesn't. Well, that would apply to everybody. I think chiropractors would feel the same, nurses would feel the same, podiatrists would feel the same. The language itself, we want to support legislation that protects consumers against false and misleading advertising. These are all positives, but you can't do it, you can't support a bill that that creates undue financial burden and other disruptions to the reputation of an entire profession simply because they're failing to provide the proper exclusions. And if anybody needs an amendment, it's us. If you look into the Chiropractic Practice Act, they already have language that protects use of chiropractic physician and doctor of chiropractic medicine. If you look into nursing, podiatry, all of these professions, they already have the language that they need in their statute. But what they're being included for is mostly the use of the title physician. Creates a very specific exemption for that. And because the use of the term physician is loosely defined in chapter 456 as providers that are licensed under 458, 459, 460, and 461. That's medicine, osteopathy, chiropractic, and podiatry. They are considered the 4 professions under the general occupation standards that are licensed as physicians in the state. You can make an argument now that we have optometric physicians. There are because that language has been provided for in the amendment. So I don't want to throw so much so many logs on a fire that I put out the flame. I hope that makes more sense to everybody as I describe it that way.
Okay, thank you.
But hey, that's a tremendous effort for you to be able to reach and be able to have this discussion with the ranking Democrat, and it warms my heart to know that there is at least a dialogue, and her attitude is saying, hey, if we can find the right language, can we get you guys to support this? And the answer is yes. We want to see adequate protections for consumers. I don't want to see anybody illegally using titles and terms in a way that harms anybody. That's not we're not in favor of that.
David, can I jump in here?
Please.
Caroline Pena. I said, what, I'm just thinking out loud about all of this. So I changed over to a cash-based practice a number of years ago. And I decided not to go for the DAOM program, just didn't need it for my setup. But I'm thinking about all of my friends who earned, they spent an extra 10 grand or more and all of that time and effort, and they did it to earn the title.
Sure.
And now all of them are going to use the ability to lose that title. So I'm also thinking of the schools. So if this passes, if it passed hypothetically, then all of those schools basically would be out of business. There would be no reason for anyone to do it at this point.
I would agree. And it's going to have a real chilling effect on the doctoral program. If we're unable to turn around and run a bill that then allows for that, and so the expense of changing our signage, changing our advertising, changing our things, and then everybody's got their fingers crossed. Is it going to be done in a year? Is it going to be a multi-year process? Running a bill is typically a challenge. And I think that, we're making a lot of headway in terms of creating contact and strengthening our relationship with legislators. But just the nature of running a bill sometimes is a 2 to 3 year process, unless the leadership is running the bill. And that's what we see in the Senate, where Pasadomo is the president of the Senate, and Harrell is a well-known, popular chairwoman of the health policy committee, they're in a strong enough position to run a bill in a year because there's very little opposition to what they want. They're in the leadership. So going forward, you can see why there's a little bit more reception for discussion about the bill on the House side, because it's not coming from the leadership's office. It's coming from the middle of the ranks, and so in order for us to have success in 1 year, it's going to be tremendously expensive, and it's going to have a certain amount of luck involved based on the legislative schedule and calendar for us to get it both heard and voted yes, passed through 3 committees in both chambers, and survive a floor vote to agree that, acupuncturists can do anything. And it's not a matter of them liking or not liking what we want to do. It's just sort of, where does it fit in the legislative scheme? Who knows what the challenges might be in 2024 to the state in general. We just don't know what that'll look like. And so if the climate's not ripe, then you get kicked down the road. Everybody's saying, hey, just give it another try next year. You guys are really close to getting the votes you need, but it's going to cost another 150 grand, and it's going to take another year, and we have to really go back to the beginning and start all over again with whipping up support to get a bill sponsored and passed through the houses. It's not a simple process.
Yeah, it makes it easier though when you have a lot of money. And
it's very, I mean, it helps because you want to be perceived as somebody who can be helpful to the legislative process, and also that money's used to stir up a lot of support for legislators. It's used to influence people in your community to be active. There's a lot of ways for you to sort of flex your muscles and help legislators be better educated and informed and motivated to support the things that are important to us.
Okay, well, I'm going to repost something on social media. If it passes, I think you'll get a lot more support especially from those that have doctoral designations in acupuncture.
Yeah.
And so they may be inclined to go ahead and join FASOMA at the yearly rate. So it'd be a good time to send something out so we can get a lot of money flowing. Just an idea.
I agree, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry, I'm not on the my Zoom link is open, but I'm not looking at that screen because I'm doing my copy and paste for emails. And so I'm sorry, the person who was telling us that they were speaking with their ranking Democrat. Again, I want to thank you so much for sharing that information. But I just, at the same time, I don't want to contradict necessarily what they were saying, but it's sort of easy for me anyway, to look and say, how they might be, even Dr. Mazzullo may believe in some extent that what he's telling his colleague is accurate, but they're not seeing, the full impact of what it is that they're doing. So they're moving ahead, basically saying, we're not going to slow this train down for acupuncturists because, hey, it doesn't apply to them anyway. When in fact, it applies. I've had the attorneys for FSOMA look at that, as well as our lobbyists, and they're used to reading and interpreting impact for legislation. And they're both, all of the feedback we're getting is, you guys can't get out from under this because it speaks pretty clearly to how non-physicians can use the term doctor and physician.
Can you clarify? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Can you clarify what you were saying a moment ago about something that we can do about those who have earned the doctoral degrees? I mean, we're already members of FASOMA. What are the next steps then? Is there another bill that could be introduced?
No, the next step, if this was to pass, is in order for those people with an academic or educational degree that includes title of doctor, like Doctor of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, that's granted here in Florida or from another state, is that those professional titles need to be authorized and defined in the statute 457 in order for you to have authority to use that in any advertising or self-promotion as a healthcare practitioner in Florida. And so the answer is, we need to run a bill that opens the Practice Act, that provides new authority and definitions for professional titles. And the reason is the only professional title that's, in my mind, is strictly authorized is the term acupuncturist. There is no other term. So until the Practice Act is updated to include those professional titles, that's the only title that you're entitled to use under your chapter, under your Practice Act.
There's probably some risk in opening the Practice Act though, right? Because then they
Always.
can make other changes. Yeah.
Well, what happens then is if you're opening the Practice Act, similar to the process that, that that Senator Harrell and, Representative Mazzullo is feeling is if somebody is running a bill for us and, people support it or they don't support it, is that phone starts ringing. And so if there's anything in our Practice Act that is either going to, somebody wants to challenge, our authority to use the term physician and doctor, and that may come from medicine, that may come from chiropractic, it may come from PTs. You don't know who's going to have an opinion on this. Is then you have to sort of fend off, their legislative navigating, and trying to influence the language in our bill to either include or not to include something. In the end, I think, one of the concerns that everybody has is that other people can then dictate or influence what's in your bill. The truth of it is that it's always our bill, our profession that's running the bill. And ultimately, if the sponsor of the bill gets a type of influence and interference that requires them to put language into the amended language or into the new version of 457, if we can't tolerate that, for example, I can't imagine what it might be, but let's say we get halfway through the process and they say, look, we can include language for an acupuncture assistant, based on criteria established by your board, but we can't tolerate use of, the word physician. Then the profession has to have its own discussion and say, do we take our win, with physician, with acupuncture assistant or something else? I'm just using that as an example. Or do we withdraw the bill because we're not going to get what we really want? And ultimately, we'll always have the authority to withdraw the bill. But how many years do you want to go introducing a bill that gets lots of interference, a lack of agreement with the things that we really want? And so, and that's the challenge. They can't ultimately put or take anything out of 456, because what FSOMA would do and our attorneys would do is you go back to your bill sponsor and say, look, this thing's been turned into Swiss cheese and we just can't live with it in its present form with all of these changes. We want you to withdraw the bill. And the sponsor will withdraw the bill, unless they turn on you in the middle of the process and say, nah, I think we're going to file it the way it is. And it's unlikely. It's not the way those relationships usually work. The sponsor would likely be disappointed, but they're acting in the interest of the profession. They're trying to support us by running a bill that's helpful. And if the bill takes some sort of crazy turn that turns out to not be helpful, they're going to accept our request to withdraw the bill.
You mentioned that you're not seeing the Zoom window. Can I help you with some of the questions that are coming through?
Yeah,
here?
please. Anybody? I'm sorry. I'm
All
just doing it because I'm emailing, but
so some of the more recent ones are, why do chiropractors have an amendment in the Senate bill? They are not in hospitals. Another one is
correct. I would say the same.
Sorry?
I would say the same, but to answer the question is because, especially in the Senate version of this, what Senator Harrell is focused more on is the use of physician and in your titling. And so what chiropractors want to do is firmly establish that they have authority over the professional title of chiropractic physician. And again, it exists in their statute in 460 already, but they're just making sure that it's clear to everybody that they're not going to get bounced from physician. And the reason in my mind, when I think about that is, especially as it applies to Medicare real quickly, is that when you look at the Medicare requirements for autonomy, is that usually what the language says is that you're a physician that's authorized or defined in, again, I'm not going to remember, it's like 1530 R1 is a section of the Social Security Act that lists physicians, and they include MDs, DOs, chiropractors, and they may be expanded to include ARNPs or APRNs now, but that's what gives them access and authority and autonomy. And so same applies here in Florida, is that they want to make sure that they don't get pushed out of that titling and privileges that come with being defined as a physician in Florida.
They're also a much larger body than acupuncturists.
Oh yeah. I mean, in the issue with the way the physician titling under under chiropractic goes way back. I mean, they've had that for many years, and this probably came out of, they had their own struggles in the late 60s and 70s legislatively, but they got it together in such a way that they're pretty well embedded in a lot of these autonomous roles where patients don't need a referral. Patients they're able to access their benefits through Medicare and insurance directly, and that all is tied closely to their definition as a physician. And that's what acupuncturists are looking for in the Medicare, the Social Security Act changes, is to get out from under this supervision requirement, because it makes it near impossible for patients to access their benefits unless they're receiving care in a physician's office who's giving direct supervision to an acupuncturist. That because those relationships don't exist. I mean, there may be one or two examples of it in the whole state of Florida. And so what we're trying to make the case to legislators there is saying, look, you created this access to care, especially for low back pain for beneficiaries under Medicare, but they can't access that care because structurally the healthcare system's not designed for acupuncturists to be working in medical doctors' offices. And so without direct supervision, nobody can use these benefits.
There are questions about the statute and the administrative code.
Yep.
Explain to me why 457 did not define us as physicians all along. That's one. And then secondarily, does the Florida Administrative Code 64B1-9 in regards to advertising not protect us against this exactly?
No.
Or does the bill overrule the administrative code because it's
Nope.
not protected in the statute?
Right. So if the bill passes, what's going to happen is that element of the Advertising Act is going to be stricken. And the Board of Acupuncture is going to be given an instruction from the DOH or DOA or whoever handles that, for them to strike acupuncture physician and doctor of Oriental medicine from that list of permitted titles. And they'll allow them to leave LAC, RAC, maybe even AP and DOM.
Hey,
But again,
Dave.
yes.
Quick question about Medicare. I sat in Sam Collins' AAC Medicare lecture the other day.
Yeah.
And he said that within the next 2 to 5 years, it's looking like acupuncturists will be able to be included in that definition, or at least that's the goal.
Yeah.
Do you think this legislation is going to affect how we get included in that definition? I think it possibly could.
I think it could too. I think because what happens is that, legislators, whether it's the state that's making a change that affects things in Florida, they often look for precedent elsewhere in the country, and they're going to say, gee, we want to let you do some expanded either scope of practice or titling or whatever it is, but they want to see examples of where that's permitted elsewhere. And so they would look to Washington, Oregon, New Mexico, other states, Colorado, to see what's possible. And the fewer examples of where that language or scope is possible, the harder the argument to make it something that's available in Florida, only because they don't want to be setting new precedent themselves. They want to, they kind of want to be in the middle of the pack. And so the same thing applies, to your question about federal legislators, is they want to create a federal standard that sort of is built on what's accepted in the states. And so when we see a restriction on titling happening around the country, or the loss of licensing, like we saw in Ohio, where they dropped Oriental medicine entirely, where they're not regulating herbal therapy anymore. Things like this, this constriction or contraction of the profession, where you're having loss of the number of licensees, changes in titling, all of these things have a chilling effect on creating legislation at the highest level. It's not impossible, but it just, there are people that are responsible for doing a legislative analysis on the impact of new legislation, and they're going to take into account trends and things like this, and so it's never helpful.
Right. Sam also said something about the supervisional aspect. He says the way it's written is as long as what the MD or the nurse practitioner or the DO, what they deem as adequate supervision for what they deem as an adequate supervision, whether that means they feel like they need to be in the office or whether it means they feel like they could be at home in their own office and taking calls there.
You know, respectfully, I disagree, because we've had that looked at, and both, you know, we've had input from especially Representative Judy Chu's office. Their legislative team has provided an interpretation of that for us and spoken with CMS directly on the impact of that language. And the answer from CMS is, without question, without equivocation, the intention of the language there is that the only supervision that is acceptable is direct supervision. And direct supervision has to be in the office, in the suite. There is no indirect supervision that includes some third party, you know, medical director in another facility providing supervision for this. And now, the effect of what's being described is, from a billing standpoint, is that the services need to be billed under the Medicare providers, their Medicare provider ID, you know, the Medicare provider number. And so, in other words, whoever the medical director is, whoever the owner of the medical office is, that is an existing approved, authorized Medicare provider, they are submitting the bill for care on behalf of whoever the Medicare beneficiary is. And that relationship is that, you know, is structurally set up so that that office is then going to pay and reimburse the acupuncturist either on salary or on some other legal terms to provide that care. So it's not like they can provide indirect supervision and submit a bill on behalf of a provider who's not being directly supervised. And although, again, I say structurally, they can do that. You know, you could have a medical director submitting claims on behalf of an acupuncturist who's got indirect supervision, who's working in another office. The problem with it is that if we're audited by Medicare, the answer to that would be that it was an improper claim, and they would demand that the money be returned as services that were supposed to be with direct supervision not being provided with direct supervision. I hope that clarifies it. So I think, you know, you can always submit a bill to an insurance company or Medicare. They're going to pay for it because they got 30 days to pay it or decline it. So they may pay it because they're looking at the claim and they think that the acupuncturist provider is in that office. But if it were audited and they said, you know, where was the facility that the treatment was actually provided in, then they would see that this was an indirect supervision and that would violate the conditions of Medicare's approval for that care.
Right, that helps a lot. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And like I say, I don't want to contradict, you know, Collins. He knows an awful lot about billing that I don't. But in this instance, we've asked CMS, we've asked Judy Chu, who's running the bill in Congress, and as part of their explanation is why is this so important that we get, you know, autonomy for our providers, is because that will break the they'll you know untether us from supervision with a medical doctor.
Not if this legislation passes, though.
I think it has a chilling effect on it. You know, it doesn't kill it because, you know, they're running on separate, you know, in parallel tracks, but they're not unaware of what one of the other says or does. You know, it definitely does not help.
David, here at the Acupuncture Massage College in Miami, a lot of the students are concerned, especially the graduating students, because they were told they would be acupuncture physicians, primary physicians in the state of Florida.
Yep.
I can assume that is going to, if this goes through, going to cause perhaps some legal issues. for the schools and.
Well, I know, I just, without being an attorney, and offering legal advice on that, I think that certainly, any, statements that were made or, understandings that were, agreed to at some point, prior to the enacting of this new legislation, and certainly beyond, is something that could not be anticipated or, likely anticipated by the school. The Practice Act has been standing since 1998, with no, like I was saying earlier, no downward pressure on this issue of titling. But now that, this legislation picks up and moves the goalposts, in such a way that we're out of the frame, we're no longer on the field. And so our remedy, is something that, we're being presented with in real time, this week, and we've got between now and July to hopefully either defeat the bill in committee or influence the governor not to sign the bill. There's a number of remedies that we can seek before we have to open the statute act. And this does not affect their scope of practice. Everybody's scope of practice remains the same. This affects use of your academic title in advertising only. They're just saying, and so until we meet the criteria that's in this new legal language. I hope that helps. And again, I wouldn't dissuade you from working with your attorneys to try to, anticipate that you're going to get some, fallout from whatever happens. But I think, if you look at the timing and how this came about, and compare that, culpability, there's probably an explanation that you guys can come to some understanding with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've emailed all of the committee members, and as you know, I've been in contact with a couple of the legislators itself, but to the point of one of our colleagues who earlier mentioned the lack of clarity with regards to the Senate bill and how we're impacted. I had to educate my state rep in that manner as well, because their assumption was that we were not impacted because we were not in the bill. So I think that's something we have to continue to do.
Yeah, no, and it's like I say, right now it's working its way through its first of three, committees of concern this morning, and the feedback that we have from our government affairs people is that the bill in of itself, outside of the acupuncture issue, is not that popular because it does impose a certain restriction on trade and interferes with access, patient access to care of their choice, and has a chilling effect on how small businesses like acupuncturists can advertise and satisfy patients' needs. All of those things are not popular issues in the House. They really feel like they want to be doing more to support small businesses, more to support patient access to care, more to support diversity in terms of access to care. And everybody's sort of like shaking their head like, we already have plenty of consumer protection laws, specifically in the healthcare industry, to protect patients against false and fraudulent and deceptive marketing practices and whatnot. Why do we need a new law that redefines and expands the definition of the practice of medicine to include specific use of titles? And all of it just seems a little inside baseball,
All right, well, thank you, David. If you need anything, let me know. I'm gonna sign.
You guys are tremendous. I'm so grateful for everybody's support this morning. The questions are great, and it gives us a chance. Sometimes I feel like I write a novel every time I try to tell somebody the smallest thing, and if I just had 30 seconds to say it, everybody could better appreciate, the impact and meaning of these various things that we're talking about. Thank you so much.
Okay, and I too have already sent all the emails. I'm gonna get off the call and make some phone calls.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you for helping me with questions. Okay, I really appreciate it.
I have a quick comment, David. This is Jonathan Fields. I've already emailed everybody about 3 times. And one of the things I'm reminding people in the emails is that I believe in our scope of practice, we are listed as a primary care provider, and we can read labs and, order imaging and do all that kind of stuff as well, which I think should help kind of sway, the kind of work that we do.
Well, I would agree. The only thing I would, and you don't have to go back and, provide a correction on this, but there is a distinction between primary care provider, primary care physician, and the way that it's defined in 457 is that we are primary healthcare providers. And so those 3 things are separate and distinct things. What we have under primary healthcare provider, although it seems like a play on words, is that what that entitles acupuncturists to is direct access. It has no real relevance in terms of the scope of practice or what's permitted and not permitted. It's really about the creating a healthcare relationship with patients in a direct access way. It does not require a referral. It does not require supervision. And that's the significance of primary healthcare provider, as opposed to primary care provider or primary care physician. Those are relationship terms that usually apply to insurance-borne relationships, where the insurance company will centralize the decision-making about how a member can access their benefits by coordination with their primary care provider, primary care physician. And that's more of a contractual relationship than it is based on scope of practice. Okay, just to clarify. But I think your point is a good and central point, and it also elevates the scope of practice in the profession of acupuncture to include a more broad approach to patient care, more so than you'd get if you were just a technician, like a phlebotomist or even a therapist in some small way. They're not responsible for global aspects of somebody's care beyond doing, referrals and prescriptions if needed, admissions to hospitals if they needed, surgery if they needed. These are things that we were not licensed to do. But for, patients, we can help educate them, help them better understand their condition. We can treat them. All of these things we can do with direct access. That's the significance of primary healthcare provider. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
And I've been licensed since 2011, and so a lot of what I hear from colleagues, and when it comes to some of those questions, is I think everybody, the schools certainly try hard, and the profession tries hard to try to give people accurate explanations for things, but sometimes without meaning to, we're sort of pushing the borders of definitions and terminology in a way that helps, that benefits the profession, or at least I think it does. And so when the rope snaps, and then we have to really drill down on what does this mean and how do we interpret this, is sometimes it comes up a little bit shorter than we think, and in a bunch of areas in our Practice Act, not just titling, but in other things too. But we're getting there. I mean, like I said, the Practice Act hasn't been amended for 25 years, mostly because it's it's served protecting the public the way it was intended to, and it's largely served the profession in terms of our scope of practice. But we are at a tipping point where I think there's aspects of our training and our education at this point that would benefit from some improved definitions in our scope of practice, just to keep pace with the profession. A lot's happened over the last 25 years that did not apply in 1998, but in 2023 it doesn't. It's important and doesn't apply. How's everybody doing? It's about 9:10, and they'll be heading into their office, leaving their offices, heading to the chamber in about 20 minutes. And I imagine we'll probably end it there, because we've had a chance to touch base with everybody that we wanted to, as best we could this morning. And then we'll keep an eye on what happens today with their vote, and then we'll move on to the House Healthcare Appropriations Subcommittee that's going to hear this bill next. And there's a whole new set of characters for us to be making our case with, and it's another opportunity to help, better inform everybody. And then ultimately realize that if it passes through all three committees, it still has to take a floor vote. And by then we'll have had a chance to really expand our messaging and talk to many, many more of the House representatives, both in our districts, as well as the people that have heard the bill. And they'll have an opportunity to either ask questions or vote no, and to help support us. So the process in the House is still at its infancy stages, and there's lots for us to do.
Dave, what's our backup plan if this goes through?
The only backup plan we have is to amend 457. And what I say amend is that we have to run a bill ourselves, which would be like a Practice Act modernization bill that would update 457 to include titles that the legislature would authorize acupuncturists to use, as well as other areas of our scope of practice that we think need to be shored up based on changes in how acupuncturists practice today versus in 1998, as well as the educational requirements and standards. And so you can run a bill, which means we have to get somebody in the House and in the Senate to sponsor a modernization bill 457. And it's a process, it's expensive, and it requires all hands on deck for for the profession to really get out in front of this issue and work with their patients, work with their local legislators to help educate them so that they understand exactly what we're asking for, why we're asking for it, what the impact of that is, how it affects and does not affect other areas of practice in medicine, because there'll be a lot of misinformation and confusion about why it is that acupuncturists want to expand their scope of practice or expand their use of titles. And so we have to be the ones that define that narrative and sort of stand on top of it to kind of keep it from rising up and mushrooming out of control.
And I think I heard something about we'll probably be needing some funding for lobbying and stuff like that. If every acupuncturist in the state donated $35 a year, we'd have some kind of good income there.
Well, that pushes, exactly, that would push our intake, to somewhere around $110,000. And that's sort of that's a nice round number to help our legislative team and our lobbyists be able to really advocate on our behalf in a way where they're welcome in those circles of influence that we really need them to be in. And it's a way that the profession is able to demonstrate, hey, we're here for the long run. We're here to, we're real. We're here to, make sure that our patients' access to care is unfettered. We're here to make sure that the profession is well represented and that people understand, who we are and what we are doing. And so without that, when you send, our gunslingers into battle with one bullet, they don't have enough oomph to really get the job done, other than to sort of beg and plead. So we want to get on the other side of that narrative and be able to say, hey, this is a profession that cares about where it's going, and it understands that in order to expand or defend its privileges under its license, that it needs to participate in the legislative process. And part of that is providing financial support to local legislators.
Understandably slow. I think that's very important. Like you said, just to show people that we're here for the long run. But is there any idea how we could get some more information out to our acupuncturists? Any plan that we could influence them more to be more giving in that way?
Well, I don't know. I think the messaging is always important, and it changes from year to year based on, the priorities. But I think, AFSOMA certainly has access to the updated contact information by email for all licensees in the state, whether they're members or not. Whether they open those messages, whether they listen to those messages, we don't have a lot of control over that. So I think, Natalia is our communications director. She's doing a wonderful job, I think, with social media, reaching out, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, or our own websites and Facebook accounts, to try to, share our messaging in a way that goes beyond just the borders of the membership. But it really requires, people that are receiving that message to stop and consider, their role and their ability to help strengthen the profession. And they have to care about it. And I don't know how else to say it, and sometimes it doesn't, we want the money is helpful. The $35 or $50 a month, that adds, a year, that adds up. But sometimes it's, for somebody that says, look, I'm only working part-time and I really don't have that much money. And, for whatever reason, they're opposed to supporting financially. That's the same person that can maybe volunteer to support their local legislator in a way that allows them to have direct access to their staff, to the representatives, shake their hand, get to meet them, introduce themselves as a business owner from the community and district, inform them about what we do and why we do it, and how, their role in supporting healthcare in the community, and create a relationship. And that doesn't cost anything. It just takes, maybe 20 minutes on a Saturday, twice a year, to get out and either hold a sign or knock on doors or do something that's supporting that representative. Because, like it or not, it's just the relationships that we develop. There's always some reciprocation. There's going to be a willingness for them to at least listen. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be compelled to act or have to act on our behalf, but at least they're listening. They're becoming better educated. They can, rationalize things and work it out with their colleagues. There's lots of ways that they can help. Again, I don't mean to drag on with that, but I hope you can see where there's multiple ways that people can support it.
David, before we hang up here, what about the title of herbalist or licensed herbalist, since we take the board and we have herbal medicine in our scope as far as titling?
Yeah, if it doesn't include doctor or physician, I don't think you're going to get, there's no disciplinary pushback on that, because it's not included under the new definition for the practice of medicine. And that's really what they're trying to carve out. In other words, if it was a doctor of herbal medicine, that would be an issue. But if it's master herbalist, certified herbalist, things like this, that's not going to fall into this language.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, David. Again, I just have one more question. Is there a press release that we could provide? My husband is an executive at NBC, and he said he could send it out to the local media, or actually all the NBC outlets. But I don't see anything in the media that this has been covered. So.
Right. Let's do this. I'll work with Ellen after our meeting later today, and do me a favor. Let me jump on just for a second and this is Dr. Doro.
Yes.
All right. And so do me a favor. Is it possible, if not, you can message me privately, but if you put your best contact information in the chat, I'll take that down now. And
Yeah, I can type it on the chat now. It's fine.
I appreciate it. We'll go ahead and forward that to you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Question.
Please.
I was on a call a few minutes ago, and the legislative aide that answered asked if we're going to have someone there to testify today.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have our government affairs team, both Corinne Mixon and Angela are going to be in the committee room, and so they'll be on the speaking agenda. And one of the challenges for that is that they noticed the agenda for the meeting on Thursday at around 4 p.m. And so, at that point, they're only required to give a 48-hour notice, and to bring in people from the profession itself was a little bit of a challenge on short notice. But this is why we have government affairs people, on salary, and they're experts at making public comments. Corinne and Angela are both well-spoken and have been advocating for acupuncturists for a long time, so they know they understand what our messaging is, and we're well represented in that way. How's everybody doing? Okay?
Hanging in there, Dave, hanging in there, holding my breath.
Yeah, I hear you, right?
Side note,
Yeah.
I came across this, it's a beverage that is a coffee replacement. It's not mud water, it's called Dandy Blend with Dandelion, and it's pretty delicious, huh? It tastes just like coffee.
Yeah, they use roasted dandelion as a coffee substitute. It's really quite tasty.
Yeah. Dave, I just want to thank you for holding the space and all the work and taking the time to explain to us. It's very helpful for myself.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I say, it sometimes is. Thank you very much, but I wish there was more we could do to really, blow this up in a positive way. But right now, I think we're just doing the best we can. And thank you for the kind thoughts and sentiment. I appreciate it.
Hello again.
Yes.
I've been making some phone calls, and those phone numbers, they're not saying it's that representative's phone number. They're saying somebody else's name. Are we sure those phone numbers are correct?
I would say, that's what's available on the House directory. Without, I'm sure they'd probably say, we can't make any guarantees that they're accurate, but because people move their offices around all the time. But those are the numbers that are assigned for the 2023 directory.
Okay, because they're just saying some person's name. They're not even saying that it's,
Well, you might be getting either legislative staff or they're
yeah, but don't you think they would say this is so-and-so's phone number?
I would agree, but again, I got to tell you that these are the numbers that we lifted them from the directory.
I think I've made 4 calls already, and not one of them have said that this phone number belongs to that representative.
And you're just getting a message, just getting a machine, nobody's picking up.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I'll investigate that a little bit further if there's an issue and we need to update that in another way. I'll do it for our next committee. But I've used a lot of those numbers in myself and been able to reach staff people, if not the representative themselves. Typically, it's staff.
Yeah, well, I don't expect to be able to talk to the representative, but I would expect that they would be proper and say this is so-and-so representatives,
No, I agree, but that's not necessarily.
Okay.
You'll hear, this is Jonathan Jones, direct line or something like that.
Okay, all right, I'll keep calling. Thank you.
Yep. It's all we can do. This is, it's at some point, the access to these people is
very limited.
In general. Even, I've been in the Capitol, on many occasions, and moving from office to office, they're expert at keeping everybody at arm's length. So it's just and I imagine that they find it necessary because otherwise they'd never get anything done. People are popping in all the time on them.
I agree, but you think this is a state building and that they're that answer the phone properly.
The other thing is also transparency in government. Florida prides itself with the Sunshine State and the Sunshine Laws in terms of access to legislators and whatnot. And sometimes, I think, like you said, they can be a little hard to get for people who pride themselves with transparency.
Okay, all right, I'll keep calling. Thank you.
A lot of new aides up there this year.
Right. Okay, guys, we're closing in on about 5 minutes, heading into the 9:30 hour. And at this point, if you hadn't had a chance to email, I just ask that we try to finish with our email lists. And then if you have another 15 minutes to, call at least the top 3 people on that list, Clemens, Borrego, and Bartleman, that would be fantastic. They're in the leadership. And actually, if I make one other, it would be Representative Saltzman, because she's going to hear this in all 3 committees, and she's in the leadership for the next committee. I want to send a shout out to Dr. Patrick. Thank you very much, John, for joining this morning, and thanks for taking time to reach out to everybody on that list. It's a big help. Thank you.
Thing just called in and he's emailed everybody on the list.
That's fantastic. Ellen, does it look like we were able to reach, everybody's questions this morning?
I think so, David.
Okay, I apologize. I know we're stressing your voice even more than it already is. Thank you for.
I guess there's one. Is there anybody really other than Senator Harrell? There's nobody really against this. We're just not getting support.
Correct. And like I said, I think that, unfortunately, like we heard this morning, is that there's a little bit of misinformation, and whether it's willful or not, Dr. Mazzullo's, his answer is that, this doesn't really affect them, and that might not be its intention, but it is indeed its effect. If it was going to be interpreted and enforced as written,
So the attorneys looked at everything.
Yeah, I mean, this is why Corinne is she's been on the case from the get-go with, as soon as we saw this in the Senate version of it in February, before it was even read in the House. And so this has been on the, between Gabe and Corinne and the firm, and Angela, their interpretation of its impact is consistent with my reading of it. And like I say, if anything changes, or there's, we get an opinion from, either the Senate or the House, or maybe we can get an opinion from the Attorney General in terms of its effect from a disciplinary standpoint, then maybe, our opinion of this can be changed if they can convince us that it does not apply. Otherwise, I think, you know, from a best practices standpoint, we have to inform the profession based on, you know, our interpretation of it so that they stay on the right side of the letter of the law.
And certainly Harold believes it applies.
I would agree, you know, she's taking a pretty hard stance as it applies to acupuncturists, and like you said, we're not entirely sure as to why that's the case, whether but obviously it speaks to the fact that we need to do more work with her office, for us to come together in terms of understanding, who and what the practice is and what acupuncturists do and don't do, and our role in healthcare delivery.
Well, I'm just remembering back to the PIP fight and how we got Negron to admit we weren't a cost driver, but they still wouldn't change it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a little bit of that. Like we turn around and say, oh, it did have a negative impact, but they have a remedy. They need to open their statute and fix it. And so that's kind of where everybody is on this. At least I say semi-privately. Everybody, whether it's Missoula or the lobbyists or anybody else looking at this, they know what the remedy is because it says clearly you can use whatever title is authorized in your statute. You say, okay, so the remedy is make sure there's language there that authorizes these titles. And you know what I mean? It's sort of like when the remedy is right in front of you. And so they're basically telling you this is the way forward. This is what we want to see you do.
But they didn't say that to the other people that they did amendments for.
I would agree, but I think in certain instances, the other people didn't need an amendment because they have authority to use, for example, chiropractic physician and doctor of chiropractic medicine is in their statute. It's in the Practice Act for 460. It's already defined. So they didn't need to be added, but they wanted to make sure that they were added. So there was no confusion about their access to the title physician. And so then you have to say why. And I think the reason why goes back to what I was saying about Medicare and autonomy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Guys, it's after 9:30 and I don't want to be the first to jump off because it was my invitation for everybody, but like everybody else, I've got to start my patient care for the day, and that's going to get going in just a minute or so. Is there anything else I can answer or help people better understand before I go? Please feel free to speak up. Okay, and so again, if time permits, I know we've all had a chance to email, but now, if we can make at least the 3 calls to the leadership on that committee, and hopefully you're getting through those 3 people at least, and you're able to just, reiterate that we're asking for a no vote, that irrespective of what the sponsor says, this does have a direct impact on acupuncturists working in their own private offices by withholding access to advertising and use of titles.
Thank you so much, David.
No, thank you, Ellen. I appreciate it. And I think, I'm more than happy. Maybe it'll be a Monday morning and maybe it'll be another day, but when we're looking at the other committees of concern, is we can do something similar where we're able to identify who's on those committees and work through these things together as a group and answer questions. I'm happy to do that.
Great.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
All your work, David. Thank you.
No. I'm so grateful to the group and to you, Ellen. We need the sort of grassroots attention on it, and everybody's doing their part and even more. And I'm so grateful. Thanks so much. I'm going to jump off, guys. If Ellen can hang for another minute or two, we'll get the meeting wrapped up. Thanks.
Well, I'm going to go too, guys, unless somebody has a question. Okay. Ending the meeting.